The greatest threat to coral reefs might be the idea that there's nothing we can do to protect coral reefs. And I admit that there have been plenty of moments when I have felt that way. What I hear is bad news after bad news after bad news, and all with stuff that I have no agency over at all. It has seemed to me like the only thing we need to do to protect coral reefs is to stop global warming. And since we cannot do that on a manageable timescale, I guess we just give up. But this is not the case, and it is in fact one of the great threats to coral reefs, is humans believing there's nothing we can do. And I found out about that because I got to talk to the executive director of the Coral Reef Alliance, and I learned that it's not like one thing. It's stress on top of stress on top of stress. And if we can mitigate some of those things, coral reefs can handle others. And even more than that, there are mysteries here. There are reefs that are doing well despite the fact that they shouldn't be. And there's a chance that we could perhaps understand what's going on in those situations and then leverage that knowledge globally to help reefs recover. And I got to have this conversation because we recently launched a line of eco-friendly cleaning products at Good.Store. There's lots of stuff. We got like this, a spray bottle that you can get these little tabs and you dissolve it in there and it becomes like an all-purpose cleaner. This is actually the glass and mirror. There's also an all-purpose cleaner. We got laundry sheets. We got dishwasher tabs. We got these little guys that you dissolve in water and it becomes hand soap. We've got oxygen brightener for your laundry. And that's not all of it. And it's been selling really well because I think people want products like these that are eco-friendly, that reduce the amount of plastics that we're dealing with here. And also, to be frank, they're cheap. And right now, if you subscribe to any EcoGeek product, you will get this for free. This is a really handy plastic-free scrubby thing. I use it all the time now when I'm doing dishes. It's great at getting off the gunked on avocado without scratching any of my pans or anything. So you can buy it or you can get it for free if you subscribe to anything that we have. It's like a special Earth Day deal. So this is temporary, will not be around forever. So you should do it now. And I mentioned this because all the profit from EcoGeek, which is this eco-friendly cleaning products line that we're doing, goes to the Coral Reef Alliance, which is why I got to have this conversation. So without further ado, here is the conversation. Can you first tell me a little bit about how, like, what you thought when you got an email from us?
Well, I was really excited because one of the things that we all try to do in this line of work in conservation is to think about our own daily choices. So it's hard to do, but it's something that when folks like you are fighting the good fight and trying to make it easier for people in terms of their everyday choices, then that's someone we want to collaborate with. So I'm looking
Nice.
forward to getting some new products and complementing some of the work I'm already
Yeah.
trying to do personally. But professionally,
Yeah.
for me, anyone that we can talk to that has an audience willing to listen, I want to get involved in coral reef conservation. It's urgent. It's important.
What I usually hear is the worst kind of thing, which is like broad strokes, bad news that you can do nothing about. And that's like the world is getting warmer, the oceans are getting more acidic, and so the corals are maybe just going to stop existing. And I know that that is a part of coral conservation. It's certainly not the whole thing, but how do you think about that from the sort of like having like trying to like go in and have local impacts on specific reefs versus the sort of like
Yeah.
global problem we find ourselves in?
It's a great question, and it's something that I hear from many different people is that sort of the news that's constantly coming out is not good when it comes to coral reefs, and how do I not get frozen in inaction based
Yeah.
on that?
Hmm.
And I just kind of look at it a couple ways. One, it's one of the world's huge ecosystems, and it's telling us some things. I used to
Yeah.
work for the National Audubon Society, so I know all about canaries in the coal mine, right? And
Hmm.
unfortunately for coral reefs, the water is taking the brunt of that global heating
Hmm.
and really absorbing a lot of that and showing us what it's going to be like in other ecosystems. And so
Yeah.
when I talk about it, I like to imagine first, right? What if all of the trees in your neighborhood instantly turned white? You would be
Hmm.
quite affected by a visual like that
Yeah.
and wonder why, what's in
Uh-huh.
the air, what's in the environment that's causing that. Well, that's happening under the ocean as we speak.
I once was at a conference and I was talking about coral bleaching. It was a not a scientific conference, um, and somebody thought that like literally people like would go out like bad vi- like villains
Oh, and
would go out
bleach
and pour
them.
bleach in the water. Can you walk me through what coral bleaching is
Sure.
and what causes it? Is it permanent, etc.?
Sure. And I'm just impressed that you were at a non-scientific conference talking about coral bleaching.
It
So
was it
kudos
was
to
like a
you. And
science fiction like in fantasy con.
oh, I love it.
Actually,
I love it.
it was a convention more than a
That's
conference.
good. Coral bleaching occurs when the water is too hot for too long. So they can withstand some little spikes in temperature, but when it stays too hot for too long, what happens is corals actually have little um, symbiotic algae that's called zooxanthellae, and they actually produce the food that the corals eat. And so what happens when it's too hot for too long is the zooxanthellae actually expel from the coral, which is why it turns white, because you don't have that food producing mechanism in there that's typically kind of a greenish or reddish color. Um, so when the zooxanthellae leave, if the water temperature goes back down in a short enough period of time, and this differs depend on the stressors that the coral
Mm-hmm.
reef is facing.
Mm-hmm.
So more stressors, that time is shorter. But if the water temperature goes down, then they can actually repopulate into the coral and it can be healthy and thrive again. So when you see white coral, it does not necessarily mean that it is completely dead. There's still hope. And so we at Coral, working with a lot of our partners, developed a coral reef bleaching toolkit that you can find on our website. And it talks about, for marine managers, what to do before, during, and after a bleaching event to help
Mm-hmm.
them recover in a better way. So while the coral's bleaching, not a great time for divers to be diving there. That's just a simple thing that you can do as a manager to make a change there in the outcome for the corals.
Just because that's an additional
It's an
stress.
additional stress, yes.
Yeah.
So when you know they're really dead, is you will typically start to see um, a, a, another type of algae form over the coral substrate, and then it looks almost like you would imagine something that in your everyday life is sort of mildewing, or going to a place where you're like, that doesn't look healthy.
It's
Same
the
thing.
side of the aquarium tank
Yes,
kind of
exactly.
situation.
Yeah.
The white, like a big bone white coral, might not be the worst situation. The worst situation is a piece of coral that looks like it's just got a bunch of scuzz growing on it.
Correct. The white
Okay.
can still recover from there, as long as the situation changes fast enough.
This is a pretty significant and global problem right now.
Yes, I mean, the numbers just keep getting worse in terms of what percentage of the coral reefs in the world are bleaching every year. It's a problem globally, and what we've seen is a 5 times increase since the 80s in terms of bleaching events. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's lots of folks that are doing different kinds of modeling to say how bad is it getting. But NOAA here in the United States did just recently, I think it was in April, declared that we're in another sort of mass global bleaching event. And so there's a threshold you have to meet that. And so it's bad. We know that, we have to work on solutions for global climate change if
Mm-hmm.
coral reefs are going to survive, and frankly other ecosystems as we move along as
Yeah.
well.
And can you talk a little bit about why, like, what makes coral reef such a vital ecosystem?
Coral reefs only take up about 1% of the world's sort of mass, but
Uh-huh.
they support 25% of our marine animals. And
That's
so,
wild.
as you, I'm sure, know, the oceans take up a huge percentage of of the
It's
Earth.
it's a big wet
It's
place.
a big wet place. And so if you're talking about 25% of the marine life and a billion people that directly
Mm-hmm.
are relying on coral reefs, it's a huge deal in terms of making sure that we have a world where coral reef ecosystems are intact. For people, you can kind of come in and out of that and say, okay, I can't take any more of that bad news right now. But for me, what's
Mm-hmm.
inspiring is these kinds of changes are happening, but we know solutions. It's really a matter of, three kind of approaches. We need to mitigate the effects we need to adapt and help coral reefs adapt so that we have less suffering either in the coral reefs or the communities themselves.
Hmm.
And where do you
Hmm.
want to spend your time? And I want to spend my time in the mitigating and adapting buckets, because those
Yeah.
seem more fun to me than the alternative. And so,
The alternative is just wallowing in sadness.
right, and no action,
Yeah.
and then that creates a
Yeah.
lot of suffering in the world, and that's not what
Yeah.
anyone wants. So I'm firmly in the action bucket, and I can convince
Yeah.
just about anyone to get there with me.
I think about this all the time that we're sort of exposed to so many problems and sort of one after another, but we're only exposed to the problem and not to the people who are working to try and solve the problem. And we, as a species, have faced a lot of problems over the
Yeah.
course of us. And a lot of those got solved through hard work and ingenuity, and a lot of them we just sort of suffered through and eventually got to the other side. But when I engage with the problem in even like a little bit more of a deep way, um, it it does two things. One, it makes me feel less bad,
Yes.
and two, it gives me opportunities for how to actually engage with the problem, and that's definitely good. Like that's definitely the way to be if you
Yes.
can be it. But my, where I before I started looking into who we might partner with on this, my sense of coral reef stuff was like, well, it's just like, what are you even going to do? The world is getting warmer. That's not a thing we can do much about. And what I'm hearing, and understandably, is that the whole problem with coral reefs is that the world is getting warmer. But having looked at the work that you do, that is it is part of the problem. It is not the whole problem. And so there are things that we can do both for climate change and also those other problems.
Yes, agreed. And I'll give you just some quick examples, right? One of the things we think about is a science paper that we published a few years ago that shows coral reefs can adapt to climate change. They can. They're already
Hmm.
evolving to do so. So we need to understand more about that and how they're doing it
Yeah.
and how we can assist them. And one of the things we know is if we have large, connected, genetically
Hmm.
diverse areas of
Hmm.
reef, then as they start to adapt, which they will do and they are doing, then they will spread and share that through the connectivity of their larvae into
Hmm.
these other areas. And so, one, that's an important foundation. We know they can adapt. And so, how do we
Hmm.
assist in that? And one of the ways to assist in that is to decrease the stressors that they have locally. So, help with the
Hmm.
fisheries, help them have clean water. And you can think of it kind of like a immunocompromised person that
Sure.
has to
Yeah.
sort of then fight a big virus like COVID, for
Hmm.
instance, right? You know they're going to have a harder time, and the ecosystems have a harder time if they're in that immunocompromised stage. So let's take that away and really sort of work on those local, regional issues and then allow them to adapt over time. And
Hmm.
we've seen great success. Um, Fisheries is a great example, working with the community, allowing that sort of community to lead, gathering data, feeding it back for management decisions. And you can see fish biomass increase by 100, 200, 500% in 1 year. So
Hmm.
nature knows how to fight back
Yeah.
and be resilient. It's just we've got to sort of be part of that process and be thinking about the future and not just where we are today.
So you mentioned three things that aren't climate change. That can be additional stressors that can make it even harder to deal with that stress that we're all working and hoping continues to get faced. And the ones that I identified you talking about were habitat fragmentation, fishing,
Hmm.
and the like the quality of the water. So not just the temperature of the water, not just the acidity, but like other stuff that's in the water, pollution, et cetera.
Right.
Is that a good summary of the
Yes.
main things
Yep.
that you all are focused on?
Yep. You hit it on the head. We're really just kind of, again, trying to ensure that the reefs can adapt to climate change. So
Mm-hmm.
we're not, you hear us say a lot, we assess, we protect, and we restore For us, it's
Hmm.
not restoring back to the reefs of 30 years ago, but it's helping the corals adapt to what the future reefs will look like. And so assess is really around science. We do a lot of foundational science that really is focused on actionable science. We don't have time, as we've already discussed. We
Hmm.
need only the amount of information to enable us to take the right action, and then monitor
Hmm.
the effects of that, and then protect. That looks different depending on what we're trying to tackle and where we are in the world, but a lot of that revolves around marine protected areas or building wastewater treatment facilities with the
Hmm.
community to take wastewater out of the water. It's protection in whatever way that needs to occur to allow for the adaptation to occur into the future. So there's really a lot we can do.
There is a lot, and there's a lot that you already have done. I was really impressed by the breadth of your work. When you kind of were like, "Would you like to work on a specific project?" Which I love.
Yeah.
As a person who's worked with a lot of nonprofits, sometimes I'm like, I just want you to do what you think is the best thing to do with this money. But it's also good when you have a project like what we're doing to be able to have a specific lens through which to see the work that is being done by the money that is being raised. Um, and I have a sort of lifelong connection to wetland restoration. My dad
Wonderful.
used to work for the Nature Conservancy in Florida,
Oh, I
so that
love
was
it.
a big thing there. My wife used to work in wetland restoration in Florida, and I like this because part of me was like, look, the easy thing to do, and this would be great. This would be like, I don't think there'd be anything wrong with this. Is to work with y'all and to help protect like a certain number of square kilometers of reef from fishing, like just decrease the human impacts on an area of reef, and that would be great. I really like this Maui wetland restoration project because it shows how connected all of these things are.
Yes.
And it's like a slightly less simple story to tell, but it is so much the case that one, in protecting this wetland, you are creating new habitat that's like non-reef habitat that is very diverse and is very vital and is, you know, wetlands in Hawaii. I can't imagine like a more sort of thriving, biodiverse kind of place. But then also that controls and increases the water quality. Like it makes the
Hmm.
water quality better for the nearby reefs, which isn't, you wouldn't think I'm going to go to the Coral Reef Alliance's website and be like, why are you talking about like wetlands? That's not a reef. Um,
Right.
and so I like that because it shows how protecting one thing protects another thing. And if you
Absolutely.
want to protect a reef, you're protecting a wetland. If you want to protect a wetland, you're protecting a reef.
Yes, yeah, that connection is so important. We actually see the coral reef ecosystem all the way from what they say in Hawaii, Melka to Makai. So it's starting at the top of the ridge and going
Mm,
out through the across the land, through the estuary, out to the coral reef, and then even out to the shelf beyond. Because the reality is that is how everything moves, both water
hmm.
and animals. And so in Hawaii and really everywhere we work, we really, really focus on working with local partners. And in Hawaii, I think it's in the first two lines of their origin story where they talk about a coral polyp. It is intrinsically part of their culture, their family, and our staff members that are Hawaiian really bring this to the forefront all the time. They are already seeing themselves, and rightfully so, as the long term stewards of those reefs. And so
Hmm.
we're just there for support, for help, for scientific guidance, to bring funding, whatever they need, so that they
Hmm.
can really, really be that long term steward of the reef that they want to be and that they are destined to be.
Hmm.
And so we really follow their lead in terms of how to work, what is needed, and so it's a really exciting project that brings that
Yeah.
whole ecosystem approach and really is focused and centered on the communities in which we're working. Um, because there's no, Coral Reef as a Coral Reef Alliance as an organization isn't going to save the world's coral reefs. We can only do that in big collaborations and big alliances
Hmm.
where we're all working together to make it happen. So thank you for joining us as part of our alliance.
Yeah. So you also do that work in in conservation specifically. So in areas that might be being overfished or are technically protected, but there's nobody actually doing the enforcement of those protections. Can you talk a little about that conservation work? How do those areas even get established?
Yeah, so we've established, I think, a total of 11 since 2017 marine protected areas. And we work on the governance or management of many of them because what we have
Hmm.
seen, and this is not unique to Coral Reef Alliance in the conservation field, is that the work to establish them is well underway. There's more that needs to be done as we learn more for sure,
Hmm.
and to get to our sort of country level 30 by 30 goals that many folks are trying to protect 30% of their lands and water by the year 3030. So lots more there, but it's really just what folks refer to as a paper park at that point. It's a
Mm.
line on a map,
Yep.
and the real challenge and the real benefits come when you effectively manage those areas. And that's harder because there's politics at play. It takes funding. You need the scientific knowledge, and you really need to be monitoring the effectiveness of your interventions. And so it's hard. That's the hard work. And so we really
Hmm.
spend a lot of our time focusing there with our partners and our bigger collaborations to just move the dial on that effectiveness and to ensure that we have long-term funding and things that will enable that to happen for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, right? And there it's hard work, and it requires a lot of trust and a lot of people at the
Hmm.
table wanting to share a vision and goals.
Do you then engage like the local community there to do some of that management? I guess is the right word.
Yeah, so in a lot of the cases, it's either completely community led, 100%,
Hmm.
or there's what we call co management agreements with the government, two, three, four, up to 10, you know, or more co managers that all take a responsibility for part of that management. And many times our role in that is to ensure that the management's happening, that it's happening as effectively as possible, that we're all collaborating, and we're talking whenever there are
Hmm.
problems and trying to come up with solutions.
I sometimes fool myself into thinking that the work is the part where you're like in it and you're like doing all this action and you're making and you're like, but like the real work is getting people to work together to do hard things where they don't agree all the time. That's the work.
That's the work.
And there's one way to never do the work, which is to ignore those people and to pretend like they aren't important or they don't have a say. And that's like when you believe that the work is like doesn't involve the work,
Right.
but that doesn't last. The work like
Yeah.
the action only lasts if you do the work to get everybody connected and believing together in how we're actually going to do
That's
like move
exactly
forward.
right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And it's hard. And there are a lot of folks that haven't even come to that conclusion yet. So you're doing a
Oh
great
yeah,
job.
no, I'm aware. I there.
You're aware. And it's hard work, and you have to have the right people, and you have to build trust, and there's accountability, and you have to be there in the
Hmm.
hard times and the easier times. Um,
Yeah.
but that is the work. And I think, what we've learned over the 30 years of our existence is, you know, you never can shy away from the hard things because that's only going to snowball and get harder later.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think one of the other things that we've learned, and most conservationists know this in one way or another, is that conservation is a long game. And so, what I mean by
Yes.
that is personalities change, challenges change, leadership changes. But when you have your eye on the goal and you know that's where we are going to all get to together, then you realize there's some ups and downs and curves along the way, but you're moving in this direction and you're
Hmm.
getting to the goal. And I think conservationists have a long time frame of patience.
Yep.
And they've all built that over time through just ensuring that, okay, we've got to step 10, but then some new players, really important players in the tourism industry or somewhere else, joined along the way. And it
Yep.
means we've got to take a couple steps backwards so that we can eventually get to our goal and have everybody along for the way.
Science also seems like it's a part of this. How do you guys interface with trying to figure out stuff and do and learn about the world?
Yes, so our science is foundational to the way that we operate. It shows us what will work, what's not working, where do we need to spend more resources or less. So we work on science at the global level, and that science really is to we're trying we're trying to come up with a collaboration of people with a proxy for genetic diversity of coral reefs. And
Okay,
so
gotcha.
this is really expensive, hard work to do in the field. If you have to go down and send divers into every single area, collect genetic samples, and then come back and analyze it and see what your genetic diversity is. Well, there are programs that marine spatial planners use as they're planning how to manage their marine protected area. And what we're hoping is that we'll be able to come up with something, and we're far along the process here, where a planner like that will just be able to click on a box that's a layer for genetic diversity. It's not perfect, but it's way better than trying to do all that genetic work yourself in the field. And many organizations and countries don't have the ability to do that. So we're doing science at that level, but then we go all the way to really granular levels with our partners as well. And one example of that is we were hearing some rumors in Roatan, Honduras, that there were some fish spawning aggregations. So areas where the fish kind of all congregate to spawn that were not identified, not being well protected in the way that we all think is necessary to have sustainable fisheries on our reef. And so we work together in collaboration and have now identified that those rumors are in fact true. Those are fish spawning aggregations. And now we're just going to work to increase the management so that there's better regulations, patrols by community-led groups to ensure that there's good management. Because as you can imagine, if you have 200, 300 groupers all aggregating there, that's a great place if you're a fisher to go and do some damage. So we work on that together, but we'll find a way to manage that well.
Is that the trickiest part of the work? Going back to the work, is it managing harvest, whatever it's called when you take fish out of the ocean?
I don't know. That's a great question. We have found that when you put in the time, build the trust, and have the communication with the fishers or the Fishers Association, that you can all get to the same page pretty quickly. They want to be able to pass on this generationally, right? And it's so much a part of who they are. And they're on the water every day. They are conservationists at heart, just like hunters are, many of them. And so I don't know if that's the hardest part. I think that the hard part when I see it really is around sort of establishing a balance of tourism, an understanding of the economic effects of inaction that's balanced with the action, right? It's complex because you're talking about from the community level all the way to sort of big corporations and governments. And so, you all have to be rowing in the same direction. And that's probably the more complex, harder part. But we're here for it. And we have some really talented staff and board and supporters that are all in for it.
I mean, this genetic diversity study sounds fascinating. I don't even know how coral species are distributed. Like, are they kind of native to one area, or are they more native to a latitude? Like, how does that even work?
Yeah.
Like, are there Atlantic and Pacific corals? I don't know how anything works.
So there are, but they're specifically really the warm water corals that we're speaking about are along the tropics. I mean, you can just kind of look across that band, and that's, if you look at a map of where the corals are in the world, they're just a little up or down from that from the
Mm-hmm.
tropic slide. And there's a reason for that. It's because they need specific things around the temperature of the water, the light that they get. There are
Yeah.
cold water corals, but that's they're not really reef building. They're just
Yeah.
different species and different things that are at depth.
Gotcha. Yeah, they're weirdos. They're not what you're picturing. But they're
They're
there.
there,
They
yeah,
they've figured out a different way to do it.
and they are important in their own way.
Do you have any like real weird things that are going on? Like are there like any moonshots? Just strange ideas. Like I think this biodiversity thing is is in that
Yes.
for me, where it's like let's understand better all of the different abilities that corals have, and then if there are some that turn out to be resistant or can handle heat better, maybe we can spread those around and have them have a happier, healthier world. But are there any other weird things like that?
Sure, there's a bunch of weird things on this earth,
Oh
and
yeah.
certainly
Oh
underwater.
good.
The
Yeah.
more you look, the weirder it gets. But I will say there, in terms of moonshot, I think we know what's working, and we've just got to focus
Mm,
and do it.
okay.
And so there's a lot of discussion at the global level around that. Let's all get together and really make a difference on some things we know are working. But with that, there's also that evolution, which it's weird. So I'll give you an
Yeah.
example. We have a reef in Tela, the north coast of Honduras, where there is no way that this reef should be thriving in the way that it is. And what I mean by that is when you
Okay.
look at the stressors there in terms of sediment and nutrients and fishing and all of the stressors, we're making headway on quite a few of them, but they're really thriving under this like layer of sediment, which is just a great example of corals that are starting to evolve. And so
Hmm.
we want to ensure that anytime the coral reef community sees an instance of this sort of adaptation that's happening, that we study it and we understand it, and and we can hopefully create the
Yeah.
the the ways to have more of that happen, because we want those corals to spread to other corals so that over time they're all able to sort of
Yeah.
adapt.
That's a hopeful thing that I did not
We
know,
call them misbehaving reefs.
but in a good
In
way.
a good way, yes.
And you think it really is like pretty much entirely genetic? Like just these are physiologically different corals?
We're trying to answer that question,
Yeah.
and that we do the same thing when we see massive bleaching events where, and this happens fairly frequently, where you'll go from 60-70% healthy coral cover to 20% after a
Mm.
bleaching event,
Hmm.
and a lot of people just want to throw their hands up, like we were talking about earlier, and we are just very interested in why did that 20% live, and what is it about
Hmm.
them that help them to survive, and answering all the questions
Yeah.
around that. So, because those 20% could really be useful as we move forward. So it's looking at the opportunities even through
Yeah.
the loss, I think, is important for all of us to do.
Like I would assume that if 20% survive, that it's because they were in an area that was just less hot. Um, but but if you're talking about a whole reef off the coast of Honduras that's just like dealing with it, like everything the world is throwing at it. I mean, this is how evolution works. It tends to not have to work this fast.
Right, right.
So maybe it needs a little bit of help.
And it doesn't always tell us all its secrets. But
No, certainly.
we're certainly listening and trying to understand, so that we can see those big changes. And again, going back to what can we do? We can do things. We see the impacts. We had a situation in the west end of Roatan, Honduras, where there was barely any of the wastewater being treated. And we
Hmm.
did a video with BBC. We talked to the local community members, and they really identified this as a problem themselves. And we worked together to do a wastewater treatment plant there and on the West End. And in just a couple of years of keeping all of that untreated sewage out of the water, now they have the highest designation that you can get for a clean and healthy beach, and it's called the Blue Flag Program. And you have to get
Mm-hmm.
certified annually. And this beach in this area, now you can swim, you can dive there. Families can go there and not worry about their kids getting sick.
Mm-hmm.
And so the answers are there. It's for
Yeah.
people and for the reefs, and we know how to do these things. And so we're in the process of working with the community and the government to do 5 to 7 more projects like that just in the next couple of years and get as much as 200 million gallons of sewage off of our reefs.
Yeah.
And also obviously there's a human health component to that as well.
Mm-hmm. And once you've done an initial first successful project like that, then you've got that some more of that trust built up, some more of the relationships with the communities, with the government, and that
Exactly.
makes it easier to go from one project to 7.
It does. It makes it go
I, yeah.
faster, and you learned a lot along the way, and
Yep.
hard lessons. And we really think about the things that didn't go well as much as we do about what did go well, so we can do it better the next
Yeah.
time.
What are your biggest limitations right now?
I think for us really is it's such a massive problem, and
Yeah.
to be really thoughtful about how we can have an outsized impact for the size of our organization, and really be thoughtful about how to work with others to learn what we've learned, successes and failures, and do more of it. And so it's a challenge. It's a challenge to think about making a difference all across the globe all at the same time. And we can't do any of that without building alliances. So we're really leaning into something that um, that our partners really appreciate about what we bring to the table, that hard work, that governance work, and learning those
Mm-hmm.
lessons. And so our
Mm-hmm.
biggest limitation really is um, having the impact we know we need to have fast enough in enough places to allow the reefs to adapt. And so we've got to grow and we've got to scale and we've got to do it all through alliances to be able to do it as urgently as needed.
What are your main funding sources?
So we have actually very diverse set of revenue, which has been really important with changes that occur
Yeah.
across the globe with leadership changes in government and all the things. So
Mm-hmm.
we rely on institutional or foundation giving. We have corporate partnerships, and we have individuals. I think that's about 55% of our funding is from individuals funding us.
Mm-hmm.
And then we do have a small amount of government funding, but not a ton, which is usually project based, really important programs to move forward, but are not our sort of core ongoing operating costs typically. So we have a variety of sources that enables us to move forward. And I will say our supporters are with us. They are with us
Yeah.
when we reach out and ask.
Mm-hmm.
They really answer and they open up and do whatever they can do. And it's really heartening to know that we're not in it alone.
Well, you're not, and I'm so happy that you are doing your work, that you've found this great organization to be a part of, and that you are your people and all the people you work with, all the members of this alliance, are taking the problem and seeing not just the worst news, but also learning enough to find the path forward. It really feels like that's what you're doing.
It's really wonderful in a day when you can have a conversation and move the needle forward and problem solve together. And you see every day that we're moving forward. We're moving forward. And some days it's a big leap. Some days it's a
Mm-hmm.
little bit. But working together to do that is so important. And
Yeah.
folks like you that are taking what you are passionate about and what you can give to the world and using that to also help solve this problem. That's the way we're going to get this work done. And
Yeah.
it's really great.
Well, I hope I send you so much money. One day at a time. We'll see how it goes. But I'm really happy that we at Good.Store found your organization, and you have been a joy to work with so far. And I hope that we are working together for a long time yet.
Well,
It's really great to meet you.
I agree so much, and I hope you really take that being part of our alliance. Really take that in because we really value each and every person that's in that, and so Anything that you're doing is what you can be doing. And so we're really just appreciative of the effort and the partnership. And I just really had fun talking to you today, too.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for staying to the end of the video. I hope that it was helpful that I put a bunch of footage of coral reefs in to keep your eyes, you probably listening to it. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. Look, I don't know how you watch YouTube, but as I said at the beginning of the video, all of the profit from all of the products that we have at EcoGeek on Good.Store goes to support the Coral Reef Alliance. And if you sign up for any subscription right now, you'll get this little guy for free. That's a Earth Day special. And that's on top of the normal discount that you get for subscribing to stuff. Subscribing is the way to go, both for you, because then you don't have to remember to like get the thing again, but also for us, because then we can more properly plan our expenditures. It's just easier when people are subscribed because you like have more regular income. But you don't care about that. That's not helpful for you. That's just for me to know. That's why I like it when you subscribe, though. Thank you for watching. They are really good products and they are not expensive. Go to Good.Store and then click on EcoGeek. You can find it there. And also while you're there, maybe you can get some good tea or coffee or soap or socks or whatever else you might be into. Because right now and as always and forever, all the profit from everything at Good.Store gets donated to charity.